Next section, and this is where I start to introduce the concepts of what cults are and their methodologies. Modern institutional order followers, and let's just, not mince words or be too verbose here. I'm talking about the police and military, are cult members. Modern institutional order followers, the police and the military, are cult members. They're not like cult members, they are cult members, provably. To understand what a cult is, we first have to really understand what religion is and means. Religion as a word in English comes from the Latin roots, the Latin verb religare. Of course, religare means in Latin to tie back, to hold back, to thwart from forward progress, to bind by tying up, to prevent from going forward. What a false religion is, okay? I want to qualify that by saying all false religions. False religions are systems of control that are based in unchallenged dogmatic belief, which holds back the progress of human consciousness. It holds back the proper understanding and reception of the laws of morality, the understanding of the difference between right and wrong behavior. That's what a false religion does. True religion unites us to something. It reunites us to natural law. It reunites us to the divine spark within all of us. And I would make the claim there's only one true religion, and that's truth itself. Just my take on what real religion is all about. If I had a religion, I would define it as the truth, period. That brings us to the question, what is a cult? If we have to define what a cult is, how will we go about doing that? Most people think of cults, and rightly so in these cases, as what we might see in like Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut movie. A powerful elite class, meeting together and doing perverse sexual rituals. And that's like kind of much lighter than reality, actually. What they were doing compared to what goes on with the real cults of the world, as you heard to begin this day with my good friend Jay Parker. I mean, you want to talk about what cults are really doing to children and even their own membership. It goes way beyond what's depicted in any Hollywood variants, okay? So this is Bohemian Grove. This is the kind of strange rituals that the elite of our world, the so-called elite, highest levels of banking and politics and media and entertainment, etc., partake in out in the California redwoods. But if we had to define what a cult actually is, this would be my best definition of it. It's a system of religious veneration and devotion which espouses beliefs that are dangerous, especially to the lives, rights, and freedoms of those who are not its members. That is what crosses over the line of being a religion just based on belief that holds back your understanding of truth, and when it goes into the realm of being a cult. A cult's beliefs are dangerous to others because cult members erroneously believe that they have rights which they actually do not possess in nature. This is what real modern day cult members look like, more so than the images you just saw on the last slide. The overwhelming bulk of the cult members of this world are in these two institutions. How the cult system is maintained is through hierarchy and compartmentalization, visualized in a simple pyramidal structure where knowledge is compartmentalized at the top, and the few at the very top are completely in the know. And then all the ignorant followers, the ignorant hordes of followers who are just going along for a paycheck or because they don't want to be singled out or because they don't want to be thought of as by their other peers as, oh, you went against the family, you went against the collective, You rebelled against your programming somehow. These ignorant masses are not in the know at all. They're not given any of the information they need to make truly informed decisions. That's how the cult is maintained. Let's look at some of the cult beliefs of order followers. What are the belief systems of the cult of ultimate evil? Cult belief number 1. We place our faith in authority. The cult of order followers rigidly believe that there is such a thing, that it exists in nature, that it is the most natural thing that can exist, and that, God forbid, we ever should do away with that concept. Authority is an illusion. It does not exist in nature. Regardless of what anyone believes, doesn't exist in nature. It exists only within a diseased mind. Authority is based entirely in violence, and it is built upon the erroneous and dogmatic belief that some people are masters who have the moral right to issue commands, while others are their slaves who have a moral obligation to obey the commands of the masters. And that's not my definition. That's what authority is, period. That's what the belief in authority is. That's what the illusory construct in a diseased mind of what authority actually is. It does not exist in nature. It only exists in a mind that is completely, severely imbalanced and does not understand truth or reality at all. What these people believe in and condone, regardless of what anyone wants to call it, I'll call it what it really is: slavery. Period. And from day one, I told people what my show is ultimately about is that I stand against all forms of slavery. Physical, mental, spiritual, manipulative slavery, soft mind control, any form of it. I want to see slavery in all of its forms abolished forever because it's based in violence, it's immoral, and it results in chaos and suffering. And it's unnecessary because it's self-inflicted. It's self-inflicted through the cult belief system. And so many people who are not direct members of this cult are ancillary supporters of it, have this cult mentality as well. And we're going to talk about them in a future section. Cult belief number 2. The second belief of the cult of ultimate evil. We have rights that others don't have. The cult of ultimate evil believes in the inequality of human rights. Order followers erroneously believe that they possess rights that others do not. Due to their cult indoctrination, they refuse to accept the truth that everyone has the exact same rights, and that no one has any more or less rights than anyone else. The cult of order followers believes that human beings can decide what rights people have or do not have. They think that comes from us, that rights come from us, that we get to make up rights based in just constructs in the mind, our whims, our likes, our preferences. Rights don't come from human beings. A right is just what I said it is, an action that doesn't cause harm to another. If you performed an action that doesn't cause harm to another, that's a right. If you performed an action that does cause harm to another, that's a wrong. And those actions exist in nature. They are real world natural conditions that we put into effect through our free will. Therefore, we don't determine whether a right is a right or a wrong is a wrong. That happens inherently as a result of the behavior itself. It's built into creation. It's something that is inherent. We don't get to make it up. So the cult followers also believe that human beings are actually capable of delegating rights which do not exist. They think we can turn wrongdoings into rights and say, oh, you're allowed to do that wrongdoing. You're allowed to inflict harm upon someone else and cause suffering. You know, some magical authority can grant that to you. We'll see how this religious belief works, how this cult belief works very soon. And they also believe that they are capable of revoking rights which actually do exist, preventing someone from carrying out an action that doesn't result in harm to another being. That's what the cult of order followers believes, that they have a right to do that, to prevent right action from being carried out. Cult belief number 3 of the cult of ultimate evil, the order followers of this world: government is our God. This supernatural entity that can grant rights or revoke rights. It can determine morality based upon its whim, the legislative stroke of a pen. I can write something down and I can make it moral. I could say the next day, oh no, we were wrong about that. That's prohibited now. Now it's immoral, and you could be punished for doing it. I mean, if you believe this, folks, you know, it's a naive child's mentality, which is what ultimately all these people are. They're people who've never grown up, and they have mommy and daddy issues, as we're going to come to soon. They have parental abandonment issues going on psychologically, whether they are even aware of them or not. I'm going to play a video about the cult of statism, the cult of the belief in government authority. Okay? Just listen to the complete contradiction that you're about to hear from a former United States Senator.
Let me see if I understand your position. Basically, would you say that it's wrong for the citizens to initiate physical force against other citizens like an armed robber does?
Unless we permit
but
that
it's okay
by law.
It's okay for the government to do so.
Because the government has been authorized by the people.
Okay, but if the government authorized armed robbers to do it, it would be okay?
If the government is that foolish to do so, I don't know what kind of country that would be, but that's legal, and if it's constitutional, so be it.
Okay, so you think that it's wrong for a citizen, an individual citizen, to initiate force against others to deprive them of their property, but it's okay for the government to do it if the majority has elected that government to.
It is okay if the government is authorized to do so. The government is authorized to levy taxes, and the authorization comes from the people.
Do the individual citizens have the right to initiate physical force against other citizens that have not initiated or threatened to initiate force against anybody and haven't violated anybody's property rights?
They cannot do that because they are not authorized to do so under the law.
So individual citizens don't have that right. If they don't have the right to initiate physical force against other citizens, could they have properly delegated that right to the government?
Oh yes, they do so right now.
Can you properly delegate a right that you do not have?
You can give the right to their representatives to make laws that will authorize or make prohibitive certain activities.
So you think that you can delegate
absolutely.
a right that you don't have? You can properly delegate a right that you don't have?
You cannot tax your neighbor, but you can authorize me as your senator to vote for a program that will tax your neighbor.
Okay, so if you say that a person can properly delegate a right that they do not have, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, well, I don't have the right to use your home in Hawaii, right? But could I delegate that right to some of my friends?
No way.
Right, so you really can't delegate a right that you don't have. You have to have the right in order to delegate
We're
it, right?
talking about the government here.
Right, but you agreed that the individuals do not have
But
the right.
you can authorize the government
Right, but did
to
you
take
agree?
over my residence.
Okay, but did you agree that the individuals did not have the right to initiate force against the other individuals? They don't have that right.
No.
So,
Although some people think they do.
then they could not have delegated that right if they didn't have it.
They would delegate authority to us, their representatives, to make laws in their best interest.
So even if they don't have the right, they can delegate it to somebody else.
To make laws that might
Right.
do that.
So then you think that you can actually delegate a right that you do not have. The individuals do not have the right to initiate force against others. I would suppose.
As individuals.
Well, if they get together, then all of a sudden they have the right?
If they authorize the government to do so, yes.
Well, if
If
nobody...
they authorize the government to enter into a war and kill people, that's a right.
It seems like there's a contradiction there as far as if you say that all legitimate governmental powers derive from the people. You agree that the individual citizens do not have the right to initiate force against other citizens, then it would seem clear that they cannot delegate that right to the
government. Why don't we
government.
just leave it this way? We disagree.
Why don't we just leave it at this? I'm in a cult and government is my God. I feel horrifically sorry for anyone who cannot fully cognize the complete inconsistencies of a brainwashed person like that. Whoever cannot see the logical fallacies and total inconsistencies in this person's total perversion of cognitive processes, I feel they are just as sick as this individual is, if it can't readily be seen. So let's talk about the techniques of cults. How do the cult leaders keep the cult lower down members, the rank and file, in line? They have very strict, rigid sets of techniques that they have employed throughout human history, and they don't waver with them because they have always worked. They've worked consistently because people have still not built their consciousness up to a level where they understand how these methodologies of manipulation work. I call this the techniques of cults, or how to brainwash willing followers who want to give away personal responsibility for their own actions. And there are 4 main cult techniques: isolation, conformity, indoctrination through repetition, and trauma. Isolation, conformity, indoctrination, and trauma. Let's take them one at a time. Cult technique number 1, isolation. Probably the single most important technique, because it makes it very difficult for anybody to penetrate the collective of the cult, the boundary of the cult. You have to physically separate the cult members or the potential cult members from the rest of their community so no reason can be spoken to them, as much as that is within your power to do so. Create an us versus them mentality. We are the family. We are the collective. Anybody outside of us is them, and they are not us. Demonize the outsiders, those who don't belong. The civilians. Somebody recently just told me what police and military are calling us are civilian pukes. One of the big names going around within the cult. The civilian pukes. Just like their cult leaders call them their dogs, their pets, their animals, as we'll get to. Isolation is probably the most important technique. And why? Why is it so? Because you have to cut off the cult members from the knowledge that they could receive from outside of the cult. And therefore, it makes them incapable of changing. Cult technique number 2, conformity. Don't tolerate any individuality within the cult. One's old identity has to be completely broken down and reformed. Completely shed and then built back up to something new and different that falls in the rigidly restricted parameters of the cult belief. And you know what? They'll be all too happy to tell you that this is what they're doing to you. In the Marines, they tell people, we're going to break you down, boy, and then we'll rebuild you back up in our image. They're all too open about how they employ these techniques. They use uniforms, one form. Rigidity. Uniforms to create sameness in appearance. And they use modes of sameness in speech and behaviors. Regimented actions. What this does is this builds up resonance. It keeps people locked in step. And they just go along with the behaviors by rote. Like a wind-up doll. Cult technique number 3, indoctrination through repetition. Rigorous schedules and instructions. Repetitive behaviors, doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. And repetition is one of the greatest forms of mind control, if not the most powerful form of mind control. They put them through obstacle courses, drills, formations, marching in step, etc. Repeated phrases, chants, and songs being employed to put them in a certain rhythm, a certain vibratory energy. Indoctrinate the mind. Give it the belief system over and over again until they believe it. Keep repeating the lie until it is widely believed. Cult technique number 4 is broken down in 2 halves, 2 parts. There's physical trauma, and then there's mental and emotional trauma. The physical trauma consists of high levels of activity to the point of exhaustion, low sleep time and disrupted sleep, high carbohydrate intake and low nutrient intake in the diet. This damages the brain. It puts somebody in a state of weakened resistance. Their body, mind, and spirit are unable to resist the dictates of the cult. They weaken them through these techniques physically. And then they use emotional trauma to weaken the spirit. Verbal and psychological abuse heaped at them continuously, constantly telling them they're not good enough. Unexpected, sudden, or shocking scenarios create trauma, create a situation. Oh, you have to jump up in the middle of the night and respond to this scenario that's happening. A perpetual atmosphere of fear. And as we saw in the natural law expressions, fear can only lead to ignorance, confusion, control, or slavery, and ultimately chaos. That's all it can ever lead to. Can't ever lead to any of the good expressions of natural law: knowledge, understanding, wisdom, freedom, sovereignty. Can't lead to any of those things. Certainly can't lead to order and justice in a society. And that's why they employ these 4 overarching methodologies. And you see, I've used images of the modern day cults. But you know what? These are the same with every single destructive religious cult that has ever existed on the face of the earth. The techniques are the exact same, identical. The cult rank and file membership of the cult of ultimate evil, which I'm talking about, the order followers, the police and military, are viciously, symbolically, occultically mocked by their cult leaders. And I talked about this at Free Your Mind 1 back in 2011 in Philadelphia. I gave a presentation called The Occult Mockery of Police and Military Personnel, where through firsthand experience of being involved in a satanic cult myself with the cult of ultimate evil's leaders, the people who actually direct these cult members, these order followers, being around them in that satanic cult, firsthand from their lips to my ears, when I was a membership of that cult, in the membership of that cult, they expressed what they think about their order followers, the people who protect them and their agenda. And the only thing they ever call these people is their dogs or their pets. That's it. They look at them as attack dogs on leashes. You'll attack when I tell you to attack, dog. You'll sit when I tell you to sit, dog. You'll sleep when I tell you to sleep. You'll eat when I tell you to eat. And they give them dog tags to wear around their neck. And they put all kinds of dark occultic symbolism all over their brain. The checkerboard floor of the house in Freemasonry represents total ignorance, total unconsciousness. The complete lack of understanding of the difference between right and wrong is what the checkered floor represents. Well, why would the cult leaders wrap it around the brain of their followers? Around the brain, symbolically. And then let's throw an inverted pentagram that represents the destruction of the human spirit and the raising of dualistic tendencies, duality, confrontation, conflict, us versus them mentality. You know, put that right on the third eye and the crown chakra, why don't we? Yeah, we're not ritualistically mocking anybody who doesn't even understand our language, our symbolic language. No. They call them their dogs. And that's what they're doing, getting to eat their worthless fiat currency out of a trough, out of a dog bowl. The supporters of order followers constitute ancillary cult membership. They are ancillary cult members, secondary members of the cult of ultimate evil. And you know what? There's a whole lot more of them than there are the main membership of the cult. A whole lot who support what this cult does, thinking that they're doing something that is good or can lead to something that is good. This is the exact dynamic that I'm talking about of ancillary cult members. The supporters of the order followers, because they're my husband or my son or my brother, etc. You know, not to make this any kind of a gender-related statement, but the ancillary followers of the cult are largely women. because they're supporting the men who are involved in the cult. The men in their lives, they'll often support blindly. Because they don't want to believe they're doing something that is evil. They don't want to confront them on it. And that's what women have to step into, a infinitely more powerful role that they have within their capability to change this world through the non-support of these cult members, the non-support of dominators. When they step into that kind of power, that's when women are stepping into the true sacred feminine power of real care, real heart-based intelligence, and that's where is going to be their power to completely transform this world. But the supporters of order followers are everywhere. Men, women, children, etc. He should have obeyed the law. They're crucifying him for a legitimate reason. They're just doing their jobs, just following orders, And of course this is it's allegorical. It's about how people just support evil and put down the thing that's actually trying to tell them to do the right thing. Destroying conscience, destroying the sacred feminine essence. In many ways, the supporters of order followers, the ancillary members of the cult of ultimate evil, are doing more damage to the morality of human society than the order followers themselves, especially due to their vastly greater numbers. Order followers and their supporters are the true destroyers of this world. Unfortunately, that statement is true. People always want to pass the buck. They want to point fingers outward. They never want to do this. See, that's what I had to do to get out of the cult. Couldn't do this. Couldn't say it was you. Couldn't say it was the cult leaders. I had to recognize at a deep fundamental level of my being that I was the problem and I was wrong. We want to pass that responsibility on to the people in the upper echelons of power, the politicians, which aren't really in the upper echelons of power, they're the puppets. But they think of the politicians as the one who are there, the international bankers, even the actual cult members, the real legitimate cult members that are part of the satanic worldwide network of Satanism and dark Luciferianism. Ultimately, those aren't the people who are destroying the world. Are they taking a role in it? Without any question. Should they be held responsible? Without any question. Who's ultimately bringing that harm into physical manifestation? The people who follow their commands. The people who enact their agenda through their behavior. These are the creators of the dark new world order. The order followers are ushering in the new dark age, not the order givers. The order givers play their role. But the order followers are the ones who bring the harm into actual manifested reality. Order followers are the destroyers of the sacred feminine dynamic of care. This is the background for my entire presentation. I brought it up as the first slide for people to contemplate at the beginning. They are taking aim at the goddess principle, the non-aggression principle, true care, the compassionate and nurturing aspects of the being. That's what they're destroying within themselves. And then through the violence and the slavery that they're enacting and supporting through their behaviors, they're destroying that dynamic of care outwardly in a wider sense in society. And this is the state of the sacred feminine dynamic of the people of the earth. The goddess is weeping, ladies and gentlemen. And she needs to be rejuvenated desperately. And we need to be the people to help rejuvenate that sacred feminine energy.